Howdy folks, today I got another amp that just came in. I was going to do a parts order for the Gallion-Kruger 200 MB that I just finished working on. Good news, look out for the part 2 of that video that's coming out soon, and that will have the amp up and running and working with the new fuse. I didn't have a 1.5 amp fuse on hand, so I threw a 3 amp fuse in once I tested everything to ensure the fuse wouldn't blow, and the amp worked fine and operated for half an hour. However, look out for part 2 for that one. In the meantime, I have this Egnater Renegade 112. Beautiful amp, covered in circuit board everywhere. Yeah, look at the power supply. It's enormous, but that's probably a lot to do with all the different power rails it needs for all these relays and channel switching and all that sort of craziness that's going on in here. Look at the amount of microchips and solid state stuff in here. Not an amp I'd ever buy. You know, I like the good old-fashioned stuff. But I was doing a visual inspection, and it keeps blowing fuses. That was the complaint from the customer. So I started off by looking at the power supply, and everything here looks nice and tidy. And then I sort of glanced over, because, you know, visual inspections first. When I took the chassis out of the cabinet, I could smell a little bit of the brown smoke escaping. Now, get down here to, let me see if I can point to this capacitor, and I've noticed it's wiggling around a bit. Anyway, I've cut this glue off because I'm going to replace the capacitor. Because if I zoom in, see if I can focus into this. That's, yeah, focused in enough. Let's see if I can. The capacitor has blown its leg completely off the pad. And this green wire that goes to what looks like pin 1 of valve 6, which I believe is the phase inverter tube before it goes into V7, 8, 9 and 10. Let me get back out here again to give you an overview of the amp. So these are 4 octal tubes, octal tube sockets. So this amp you can run KT88s, you can run EL34s, you can run 6 L6s, 6 V6s, anything you want. And the owner has given me the manual here. And what's amazing about this manual, it's got 2 pages of how to bias the tubes, and it talks about biasing. It's got external bias points on the outside of the amp here. Let's have a look here quickly. Right, test point 1, test point 2, and little trim pots to adjust. Sorry, let me get a good, there we go, you can see that now. And fuses for each side as well. This amp does have a lot of fuses, which is great. But here, we've got all these different bias settings, recommended bias settings for all these different tubes. Oh, I did say KT88, sorry. 66s and 77s. So, great the manufacturer does give you this information. And it also talks about, you know, all this stuff about how to bias correctly and what you're doing. And, you know, valves do get up to 800 degrees, and that's true. I've experienced that. Let's see if I can show you that scar on my finger right there. You know, valves get hot. Anyway, so there's the manual. The customer has EL34s that are going in here. He has them. I don't know why he took them out, but I called him and asked him if he wanted me to replace them. He said no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reflow that solder joint. I've ordered new fuses for that GK bass amp that I fixed yesterday, and I'm going to order fuses for this thing as well, and I'll give him a couple of spares. I'm also going to order this capacitor here. It is what is it, 104J 630 volt. So I'll get a couple of these. I'm going to have to unplug all of these wires. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to refer to this video later so I can put them back in the right place, because it'll be lethal if I don't. I'm also going to mark a lot of these wires. There's, including all these, there's about 30 wires just on this main power board. There's another 20 wires on the preamp board, and they're all coming off this humongous power supply here that separates all the different voltages. So normally tube amps have, 6.3 volt high amperage for your heaters, and they have your high voltage, your B plus, that go to the different tubes. This is much more complicated, and mucking up one of these plugs, it's not going to be fun. It's a very expensive mistake. Anyway, part 2 will be me ripping out the circuit board, changing this capacitor over, looking underneath for any other issues. I'm going to reflow this. Oh, I found a dry solder joint on the, I don't know if you can see that. Let me focus. Focus. There we go. There's not only a dry solder joint, the pin sticking out of the solder joint, and the solder is actually not making contact with that pin, with pin 4. So that might have caused an issue with the valve going crazy. I haven't looked at I never remember the pin outs for valves or tubes, whatever country you're from. But pin 4 looks like, because that's the beginning, so pin 1, 2, 3, 4, clockwise direction. That looks like the pin 4 for the 12AX7 phase inverter. I don't know what that does, I haven't looked, because again I keep forgetting what they are. And that's probably likely been the culprit that's made this go ballistic and pop. Looking over the rest of the amp, there aren't any other solder joint issues. However, I'm going to reflow all of these anyway, because I'm here, why not? And looking over the rest of the amp, it all looks okay. So, and there's your city of rock and roll right there. Okay, lots more fuses. None of these are blown. And some more fuses up here somewhere, if I remember correctly. No, just on the main board maybe. Anyway, power supply has lots of fuses. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's it. So, and then plus you've got your fuses here, and plus you've got your main fuse in here, which I've taken out because that's the blown one. Anyway, part 2 will be replacing this capacitor, this out of focus capacitor, that capacitor, still out of focus, there we go, that capacitor, checking over the rest of the amp, bringing it up slowly, and see what happens. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, do all that stuff. Helps out a lot. And yeah, see you in part 2.